This is Dr. Ben Weitz with the Rational Wellness Podcast, bringing you the cutting edge information on health and nutrition from the latest scientific research and by interviewing the top experts in the field. Please subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast on iTunes and YouTube, and sign up for my free ebook on my website by going to drweitz.com. Let's get started on your road to better health. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Thank you so much for joining me again today. For those of you who enjoy the Rational Wellness Podcast, please go to iTunes and give us a ratings and review. That way more people can find out about the Rational Wellness Podcast. Our topic for today is the role that our gut bacteria play in helping us to detoxify toxins. Dr. Grace Liu is a doctor of pharmacy and a functional medicine practitioner, and she's known as the gut goddess. Grace, thank you so much for joining me today.
Dr. Weiss, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so grateful and glad for this opportunity to talk about all our good friendlies in the gut.
So what the hell do gut bacteria have to do with toxins?
Well, it's a very, very minor role that they may play, but because our world is like a big toxic soup that we live in currently, our air, water, food is all very much contaminated. They may be playing more of a major role. And even in functional medicine, their role is not fully known. And I actually wasn't even fully aware of all their roles for our detoxification pathways until more like just recently, the last few years, because the studies now are available, which are just amazing. Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot, but just like a lot of functional medicine studies, there's not a lot out there unless you have a big, deep pocket pharma behind you.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting. It seems like it goes both ways. There are a number of ways in which the gut bacteria actually create more toxins. And I had a discussion a couple of podcasts ago about TMAO, which is this marker for heart disease. And TMAO, it actually is produced by the gut bacteria in the presence of carnitine and choline, either from food or supplements. And so there's several ways in which gut bacteria actually create toxins for us. I also saw a study where arsenic, gut bacteria change arsenic and make it from inorganic to a more dangerous form of arsenic.
I know. Yeah. Those are fascinating, controversial points, which we often talk about as practitioners on your amazing forum in the closed group. I love that.
Yeah, the TMAO thing, I think, is really interesting because the Cleveland Clinic is really touting that as a major factor in heart disease.
Yeah. And as we know, vegetarians and vegans who don't eat those high carnitine sources, they still get heart attacks, strokes, and embolic events. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't buy this TMAO thing because carnitine and choline are so important for our health and
detox.
And for detox and even our health of the heart. So I just can't believe that those are bad things to consume, especially when one of the foods that most causes TMAO is fish. Anyway, how can gut bacteria help us get rid of toxins?
So what I do at the Gut Institute, I'm founder of the Gut Institute, and we are an educational platform. We love to share about how our amazing gut flora, the probiotics primarily, are really what we need to safeguard our health. They protect us, they keep us our health tight as well as our butts, and create this non-leaky permeability of the gut lining. All our guts are leaky. Babies are born leaky. So they can take in the immunoglobulins from breast milk and mom. They have no immune system when they're born. So it's mainly what mom shares with them, right? And actually they're probiotics. They get baby probiotics through mom, through the breast milk. It's not sterile.
Do you test for the gut, or do you just sort of assume we all have it?
Yeah, there's no point in testing. Our modern testing methods are just so lame and primitive, actually. We can presume if someone has a chronic condition and the degree of it, like there's quite a lot of permeability. So depending on the test you decide to choose on, you may find it or you may not. And it may be just selective permeability. And it actually has to do with the signature.
You don't find zonulin of any benefit?
No, a lot of times I suspected, but 90% of the time it won't be elevated on the testing that you pull. And then actually now some of the, it's good these, test companies are reconciling what we see, because they'll have a disclaimer, oh, just because it's negative doesn't mean anything. Well, yeah, hello. Just like we do stool testing, we don't find fungal overgrowth. Just because it's negative doesn't mean it exists there. You just pulled the wrong test. You pulled a lousy test. You got to pull a urine organic acid oat. So how we look at the environment is very important for what we do. We do terrain medicine now and functional medicine. And this is how conventional may be moving eventually, if there's not a lot of barriers, because sometimes there's not a lot of money for the things that recover our terrain. Yeah. So it doesn't behoove like FDA who are kind of like, not always for the health of the populace.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see conventional medicine moving towards terrain medicine because it's complex medicine and they don't, it's not part of the model. Maybe,
yeah. So when we lose this legacy from mom, then we don't have our protection and our firewalls. Just like, our computers have firewalls, right? Do you have a cleanup system, a malware protection on your computers, Dr. Weitz?
Yep.
Yeah. So our bodies have that as well. We've co-evolved with it for the last 1 million, 2 million years. As soon as our kind of emerged, if you believe in evolution, and move toward that. We have always been near the earth, eaten off the earth. Things were covered with soil. There's soil bacteria as well as, vegetation has different kind of bacteria. A lot of the above ground have lactobacilli. So when we ferment foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, kombucha, we're getting a lot of those lactose strains and other like acid producing strains. And then when they go anaerobic a bit, like without oxygen, without air, when we seal a system, those like flourish, right? And they prevent mold from growing. So we didn't have refrigeration up until 50, 100 years ago, chilling our food. So we always relied on preserving our food via actually our bacteria. So we had many ways of replenishing. But now, because we don't refrigerate, we refrigerate now and we don't eat these foods, mom's legacy may be disrupted and broken. The flora that mom used to have is no longer conferred to the baby. And this new generation is living without a whole firewall. And even our generation a bit.
And when you're talking about the mom, you're talking about the fact that we have so many C-sections and
formula,
right?
If you get Pitocin as a mom, a pregnant mom, if they need to induce the baby, they give something called Pitocin. If you're in the hospital, a hospital gets many fines or like negative points if there's complications that arise. So to prevent a complication like sepsis, which is a bacterial infection in the blood, or abdominal skin infection, as a result of hospital procedures, they give everyone IV antibiotics with Pitocin.
Right.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So now you have a high dose IV antibiotic in the system. It literally wipes everything clean. Can you imagine like you've wiped clear your hard drive, like every time you go into a hospital, like no more memories, no more, pictures, no more, your documents are gone, right? You're kind of screwed, right? You're screwed in many, many ways. So this is what's happening. And this has really been, it's not just C-sections, it's also any surgery. Some of my worst cases are where they've had, something happened, an accident happens, or a knee breaks, right? You need to have surgery. So guess what? Sometimes, IV antibiotics or many oral antibiotics, by mouth antibiotics are given. And it's also permeating our food now, right? The last 20, 50 years, farmers found, domestic farmers found that if they gave antibiotics to their herds, they'd instantly gain weight. So that meant more money for them. But they were really causing diabetes and morbid obesity. But, animals don't live that long. They just got mini fat, right? They got fat. And so it meant more profits for them. But we're eating fat animals that are also ill and sick. And they're just fat, not more muscle necessarily. They're just weighing more. Yeah, and it helped the farmer, but it doesn't help our kind.
Right.
Yeah. So, grains and are laced with pesticides. Pesticides are actually antifungal, against the good ones, and they're antimicrobial in a bad way. And same, glyphosate shown over and over that it causes a kind of soil dysbiosis. So really, our guts are probably reflecting our earth right now. And it's horrible, to imagine how it's going to go forward the next 20, 50 years. It's not really sustainable to have soil with such a low diversity and having plants that are just full of yucky flora. So it's really great. I think you brought up the TMAO. If we dig longer and further, deeper, the signature of people who have heart disease is one of really severe deep dysbiosis. They're lacking all the good flora. So I'm going to delineate what the good flora are. In healthy control guts, whether they're in rural communities, hunter-gatherer societies, European tend to have better like healthy controls. I wouldn't look at any of the last 20 years of like US studies. They're healthy. Their idea of healthy controls, if you look at their BMIs, they're not healthy. They're very obese. They have yet to like manifest something or you know, but if you look at the BMIs, they're not actually healthy. Or if you look at a liver test, they all have non-alcoholic liver. They're not healthy. Yeah, they have early dysbiosis or really severe dysbiosis. But if you look at European studies, they all their functional markers, you know, rack up to a really healthy person. All their conventional labs as well as functional labs, you know, tend to fall in place. So if you look at them, they have a really healthy signature. I kind of look at things like a financial portfolio. So you can have assets, right? And you can have like liabilities, debt, right? The worst debt might be like multiple credit card debt, right? And assets are like, you know, a diverse portfolio. It's, you know, got bonds as well as S&P, you know, 100 stock and real estate, maybe good real estate, right? So, you know, we're talking about like, we know this for many things, for financial things. Now we have to think about that, apply those analogies to the gut. And when we looked at the signature of people who are healthy, they have very few of the TMA producing putrefying bacteria, actually, which are known as like Klebsiella, Citrobacter, E. coli. We all know these to be very, very not very good. And there's many reasons. They're producing toxins that may kill our heart or cause cancer. And it's not that we want to eradicate these, you know, this whole idea like, oh, let's like eliminate, eradicate, you know, it's actually not good because along there, we're going to also be messing up the terrain further. Yeah. So we have to think about how to rejuvenate maybe.
So maybe TMAO is a marker for dysbiotic gut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's an amazing study by someone I really follow because he has a lot of great protocols in the studies. So we have adapted things in functional medicine, but one is Dr. Zhao Liping. He had a genetic study, a genetic obesity study. He had like just conventional obesity as well as genetic. There's a condition called Prader-Willis, I think, and it's genetic.
What is it called?
Prader-Willi.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a genetic, there's like various genetic mutations that allows these people to get overweight really quickly. It's genetic. And he applied a diet very high in prebiotics.
Okay.
And found that he could grow all the good flora. So the good flora eat fiber. They don't eat garbage, you know. And he was able to shift it. They lowered their BMI very slowly. I would have done things a lot differently for faster results. We tend to get really good results. We reduce brain fog, body fat, and fatigue in usually 6 months or less. So it was a very long study, over 6 months long. But they did see results with that. And what they did was they focused on how to regrow the good flora. And then naturally the good flora, they're going to help change the terrain, eliminate, eradicate for us the bad flora, the TMAO producing flora. So what they found in the study was that TMAO levels went down in the treatment group, not compared to the control who were eating a standard diet. Yeah, so we have many markers. So I look at the urine organic acid. We look at cresol, which comes from Clostridium. We look at various fungal markers, furans, as well as tartaric acid, many others. There's 9 markers on a standard urine organic acid test from Great Plains, and then 3 other markers known as oxalates that tell us a lot about the fungal overgrowth. And this is easily overlooked by a lot of functional medicine practitioners. They don't know how to look for this. And so they're missing a whole side of the terrain. In fact, I would say for disease, maybe 90% of the terrain. Wow. All our protocols, yeah, we combine like antifungal botanicals and even prescriptions sometimes if needed, to the protocols to see what we're, trying to help to change in the terrain in terms of negatives. And in the portfolio, what I look for is to see the good stuff growing back up, lactobacilli, bifido. There's also our ABCs start with the A's. So that's, you don't have to remember all these technical names, but Akkermansia is one of our big ones. A for Akkermansia. Yeah. And it's actually like a U-shaped curve, Too low is not great, and we may over-focus on that. Actually, excess levels aren't great either. Akkermansia loves to eat mucin as their prebiotic. Their fiber is more gooey things like our mucus as well as mucus, so they're mucus eaters. So Akkermansia mucinophila, that's the name of the species that stands for A, that all the healthy people have. Centenarians have high amounts of it. healthy people in the ruralist areas, and hunter-gatherers, people without disease, people without cancer. Now swinging on the other side, because it eats mucus, if someone's sick, it's kind of like having a runny nose, like if you have allergies or hay fever, right? Or you have a cold. Same like the gut can get runny. If there's a lot of stress and inflammation in the gut, it may get runny. So there's excess mucus. And then if we see high levels of Akkermansia, it's not a good sign. So it's always the context of what's going on. Sometimes people are a little over-focused on, high or low, and you totally ignore the context of the host, right? The whole ecosystem, the whole terrain. And the other, so part of ABCs, the B is called the bifido. We think of these as our standard probiotics, but there's actually good bifido and bad bifido in our little financial portfolio. The bad bifido tend to eat a lot of sugars and carbs, and they're not the foundational bifido that we need. We need some, but we don't need a ton. And for a lot of people, they're overgrowing and they don't have the other Bs. The other good bifido, like bifido longum, bifido infantis, bifido lactis. Just by the way, too, these probiotics, they cost an arm and a leg. Like they cost more than Coke per kilo. So I'm a probiotic formula maker.
Can we make money selling our gut bacteria short? Short selling?
Yeah, a lot of my friends, I told them their kids have great flora. When we looked at their portfolio, I'm like, you should start saving for the college. And they submit the stools to different FMT banks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My kids ignore me when I talk about this. They don't want to get involved at all.
They don't want to eat capsules filled with poop.
Yeah, yeah. They're contributing to society. Appealing. It's awesome.
There you go.
People can make like $1,000 or $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Income. Off of poop.
One of the interesting things when we talk about, trying to improve your gut bacteria and your microbiota is that we know that when you take probiotics, they're only temporary visitors. They don't continue to live there. So how is it that you can actually change your gut bacteria to have more Akkermansia or whatever strains you're trying to promote? If the probiotics we consume are, only there for a short period of time and then gone.
So first of all, there are various studies that show actually that's not true, Dr. Weitz. Yeah, so I don't know if it's a fallacy, promoted by people who don't read super deep in the literature, but our good gut flora, they follow us everywhere, and some come in a pill, in a capsule, some come in food, but they aren't just transient visitors. The ones that are core to our, they're called the MAM, microbiota associated, mucosa associated microbiota. So right along we have several layers. Let's say this is our GI tract, right?
Okay.
There's the muscle, right? Smooth muscle.
Right.
We have several layers. There's 2 layers of mucus. The inner layer is full of some flora, good flora, but they don't trespass beyond. And there's an inner layer of mucus, which is pretty much almost sterile. Our flora, when they're present, the ABCs are present, then they actually make all these chemicals that keep the boundary tight and target certain pathogenic flora that really like to invade. So that inner mucus, the deep mucus, actually is very sterile. And then we have some flora that live there, and they're very few. It's called the MAM, mucosa associated microbiota. And these actually include the good bifido and lacto, and also good roseburia that eats inulin, roseburia inuloverins. There's other roseburia that actually aren't so good for us. So we can actually drill down a lot of the strains. Just there's good strep, right? There's even good strep that combat our gums, help our gums and combat cavities. There's good strep, but there's also bad strep. In fact, almost all the other strep are kind of bad. Strep sanguineus, strep mutans, those cause cavities,
So
and we have a lot of strep, strep.
Are you saying that some of the bacteria contained in probiotics, whether it be lactobacillus or bifido or et cetera, that those become permanent residents in our gut?
Especially, yes, if they eat the mucus. Yeah, it's called anchoring and engrafting. So, it's really awesome. In my last year in pharmacy school, I spent a year at Stanford as part of my rotation. And I was so lucky. I did one rotation actually in the transplant unit. And it was so cool, seeing different protocols that would inhibit something called graft versus host disease. It was a rejection syndrome, graft versus host disease.
Okay.
And what studies show now for transplant is that, and actually even same with implantation of after IVF, in vitro fertilization methods, transplantation and then the implant of a human cell requires actually good flora in the terrain.
Okay.
And a lot of these flora are our ABCs, it turns out. They need to be present to help facilitate the organ to stay there without rejection. And basically, this is going to save the person's life. Or for a woman who's infertile or barren, trying to have kids, that means success for her body to actually take what is evolutionary, our full right to, bear children. Yeah, but it requires flora, the right flora, the good flora, not the bad versions of the flora.
Right.
Yeah. So there's, it has to do with their DNA too. They all share DNA. In one minute, they may be resistant to high dose antibiotic. Another minute, they're not. They're always sharing their DNA. It's called conjugation. They're an amazing organ for us. They're a silent organ. So when we think about them, we don't think about them as, they weigh as much as our brain, actually, 2 or 3 pounds or more. And they're really coming, the light is starting to be seen by what they do for us and what they don't do. Like they can prematurely end our life easily. It's usually when the ABCs aren't there. And it's not hard to get them back in too, but it takes some protocols actually a little bit to help open up ecological niches for them. So they actually have a chair to sit in, it's like magical chairs in a way. Like my goal is like to open some of these niches so we can get the high dose probiotics in.
So is it more effective to consume the bacteria as probiotics or to give them the proper prebiotic fuel to cause those bacteria that we're trying to promote?
Oh, that's a great question. It depends on the stage of healing. So early on, I don't use actually a lot of fiber. For instance, some of the really nifty, swifty kind of bacteria, like for instance, seeing that secrete TMAO, they also have adapted. They can eat some of our fiber that we tend to think about as really great, awesome prebiotics. Some eat inulin, some eat oligosaccharides. So for instance, some people with dysbiosis, they don't tolerate FODMAPs. Not everybody, but a lot of people, when they find that they eliminate the FODMAPs, they find, oh my gosh, my bloating and brain fog actually go away. Well, they have actually flora, it could be good or bad even, but they're in the wrong place.
So you're saying when we're working with a patient who's suffering from a GI disorder like IBS or inflammatory bowel disease or something like that, you won't use fiber at the beginning?
No, but I use a different kind of prebiotic. They're called polyphenols, antioxidants. So we utilize a lot of these in functional medicine. Little did we know that actually we're superfeeding our good gut flora, the ABCs primarily. And it's really interesting. The bad flora, the pathogenic flora, they have not adapted yet to eat polyphenols. Polyphenols are usually in low quantity. They're very bitter. They're medicinal. Usually besides feeding good gut flora, they actually have antimicrobial benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, they actually will kill them. So they have not adapted to learn how to eat them, fortunately. So we can really create this selective ecosystem and terrain by using the right ones. And a lot of them are found in like ancient Russian medicine, German medicine, Chinese, Korean medicine, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, Japanese medicine.
Okay, so let's get to the gut bacteria. And which gut bacteria help with detoxifying heavy metals and arsenic and xenoestrogens and things like that?
It turns out our ABCs are the ones that do that for us.
Okay.
Not the good, not the bad signatures that show up, where, the bad signatures which are contributing to disease, the ones that putrefy TMAO, the ones that cause a lot of like cancer, cancer chemicals, are associated with cancers, not those, but our ABCs, the good ones.
Okay.
They all do that. Yeah. So let me tell you about bifidolongum and L-rhamnosus. These are high amounts in our Bifidomaximus probiotics, actually the highest strength in the market right now.
That's a probiotic that you sell.
Yes. Bifidomaximus is only sold by us here at the Gut Institute.
Okay.
Yeah. And the way I formulate it is that it's based on all the studies where healthy controls have the good gut flora. They don't have celiac, they don't have gluten intolerance, and they also don't have heavy metal problems. They don't have other health issues. So for instance, one study by Gregory Reed, he's a big probiotic formulator. They were able to get funding from to do like studies in Africa, Tanzania in particular. There's a lot of silver mines and other heavy and metal kind of mining there. So they actually end up in the process of silver mining, they leach out a bunch of heavy metals that are toxic for humans and other animals and fish. They go into the water. So even their small fish, usually we say, oh, the big predator fish, you know, have a lot of concentration of heavy metals. Well, it turns out in Africa and Tanzania, even the small fish that the villagers were eating, and it ended up being very high and toxic in heavy metals. So what he designed was a yogurt, a 200-gram yogurt with 10 billion L-rhamnosus, GR1, strain GR1, and they made it into a yogurt, and they gave it to pregnant women and children. Like, this would not pass like IRB here in the US. Maybe it would, who knows, right? Because there's no other, you know, no other solutions really. And in that village, people were able to also create little economies too, to make the yogurt. So it actually could, you know, increase like economic advantages for the impoverished here. So what they showed was in pregnant women, the women who took the yogurt, they found that they had 36% less arsenic in the body compared to the controls who did not have the yogurt and had the placebo. And then 36% less mercury, and 78% less arsenic, which is so substantial for this population that are, you know, they actually have like really high heavy metal toxicity. And all it was just a daily.
Which particular strain was in that yogurt?
It's called L-rhamnosus GR1, but it turns out many of the L-rhamnosus strains also have this benefit to detox in an in vitro plate. They can lower the concentrations of all kinds of heavy metals. Yeah, and it would go out in the system.
So these are particular strains of Bifidolongus, right?
Lactobacillus rhamnosus is a lactobacilli.
Oh,
but they also did the same. Yeah, they also did the same study with Bifidolongum, and many strains of Bifidolongum also contribute to this benefit. So it's believed actually it's a class effect.
Okay.
All of them have this ability, unless they're a weird mutation or something. Yeah, and I would say for our probiotic, invariably when people go through our program, they're always using high doses of Bifidobacillus. We don't always do testing in the beginning, but we test later. No one has glyphosate. Even after provocation with glutathione for a month, that's the typical way to do it. You provocate with glutathione. We check using using a glyphosate study from Great Plains. People had like not really any detectable levels at all. And when people start with us, we do really gentle chelation. We don't really do a ton. It's not so healthy when you don't have a good gut anyway to do that. But we'll see people also, their numbers go down. And I didn't know where to attribute it, you know. But I think actually the probiotics make a big deal. We do so many different things. I can't say that's the factor.
So how do you discover that a patient has heavy metals? Does it come from history? Does it just come up on one of your routine testing? And then when you do suspect somebody has heavy metals, how do you like to test for it?
I look at sometimes their genetic SNPs. If they have mutations on glutathione, several of the MTRR, MTHFR mutations, and then ApoE4, any of those will contribute to more heavy metals. I don't always test because I know our protocols end up lowering it, but some of my clients, they're great biohackers. They come to me, they already have a lot of this testing from prior practitioners. Yeah, sometimes we will test. So we'll do different kind of testing, either hair after provocation, you can do urine. You know, again, it depends on the variants they have, the genetic variants. Some don't release. You have to provocate for not just 1 month, but even 2 months to actually see something because they hold on to it. And also they all have poor guts in the beginning too. They may not release, even though they look like a picture of heavy metal toxicity, they don't always release. Right. A lot of our protocols help to move those pathways. We try to look what the genetic SNPs are so we can start to bypass them. It's not necessary to bypass all of them in the beginning. It's also going to be like 20 million supplements. So what we do is just try to get the gut back online. We try to get the ABCs back online because they do it all. So for instance, Bifido and Lacto, what's so awesome about these strains is that, you know, as you know, for detox, we can use different resins, right? Questran, Welcall, these are all resins, pharmaceutical resins. So they pull mycotoxins, they also pull xenoestrogens, and they pull glyphosate, pesticides, they pull heavy metals often, right? We use also Quicksilver Ultra Binder. It's got different resins in there.
Right.
Yeah, right. Charcoal clay, as well as sulfur-based resins, and a biological one called chitin or chitin. Right. So these bind. Well, it turns out the cell wall, bifido, certain strains of the good bifido and the lacto, again, they're in the Bifido maximus, their cell wall acts as an ionic resin. So whether it's highly charged positive heavy metal or highly negatively charged heavy metal, from mercury, arsenic, cadmium, all of them have different charges. They still get bound up. We don't use too much of them. Sometimes we pulse these because they also can, I think theoretically, also bind our good stuff, our good zinc, good mag, good iodine. So we don't want to pull too much of the good stuff, especially if people are already depleted and want to make sure they get repleted as, safely as we can. But as they bind them, especially at high dose, they anchor, and then some are going to leave and die, and then they're defecated out. They take with them all these yucky things. Yeah.
So your protocol for heavy metals is glutathione binders and then specific probiotics. Is that it?
Exactly. Yeah. And opening up biofilms is really important. A lot of people don't realize, the higher dose of antibiotic they had, rifaximin, it selects for toxic strains that are super weedy. They're like weeds, and they're also super nasty. So once the drug leaves the system, they're only left with these nasties. And if you don't have the good ABCs in there, they're just going to proliferate. Only the ABCs keep them in check. You can meditate, do prayer, yoga, all the F you want. They are not going to keep out the bad guys as soon as stress happens. Everyone's got stress now. We have blue light stress, right? All kinds of stress we're not even aware of. EMF, smart meters. I don't need to really go in depth on all that, but go take a class, right? But all these bombard us all day. Like you're mentioning assaults to our gut. We have multiple assaults on the gut that did not even exist like 2 years ago.
Okay. And you mentioned biofilms. Do you try to address biofilms in some way?
We must, yeah. Especially when people have more of those genetic mutations that I mentioned to you. FUT2 is a big one as well. All our clients, 99%, all have mutations on FUT2. The healthier ones, like I also work with MMA fighters and endurance athletes, Spartan racers, champions, Ironmen, Iron women. Actually, the better genes someone has, like to withstand environmental assaults, they're usually going to excel in life through athletics. Or I work with executives too, multitasking moms. They tend to all excel in life, but they also have a few of these relevant kind of genetic, markers and variants.
Those MMA
also
probably have plenty of bacteria get their face rubbed in those mats, and
I know, and they withstand all of them. They withstand all of them because they're usually not FUT2, and they're not ApoE4 ever. When you look at their MTHFR reports, I use MTHFR support, the Sterling Zap. They're like seas of green, just all green, 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 green. Yeah, especially next to mine. I'm like, wow, like what a difference. They're genetically like another species. And the hormones patterns show it as well too. They have all the like healthy longevity hormone patterns. We do something called fertility physics. Like no matter how old someone is, there's certain ratios where, higher anabolic is gonna be like higher than the estradiol. Estradiol is just a marker. It's usually a stress marker. So we pair it up against there and look at it.
What is that now? Estradiol is a stress marker?
Yeah, so it's released when aromatase goes high, especially with gut inflammation.
Estradiol goes higher with gut inflammation. You mean because estrogen is being recirculated instead of excreted out?
There's a hormone called aromatase. It gets lit up when there's central stress going on, central inflammation going on. Gut stress is literally 90% of the stress I see people in. And when we eliminate that using 4 phases, we target different things. And always at every phase, we're trying to bring back the ABCs through polyphenols and our protocols and really high dose. We even use 1 trillion a day probiotics every day of the Bifido maximus. Then we are able to massage all that. Yeah. And then we see aromatase go down. Also, I use specific botanicals to lower the aromatase activity. So it's not so turned on for people. And they feel better.
What do you
instantly start.
Do you use
way more than that. Way more than that.
What do you
olive leaf, bitter melon's amazing, which is like an ancient Chinese.
Bitter melon? I always think of that blood sugar, but that helps with estrogen detoxification.
High blood sugars is just leaky gut. And all these people on the keto diet, it's awesome. What they're trying to do is just repair their gut, but they don't realize like without polyphenols and certain prebiotics, they're going to keep losing their ABCs. That's what studies show. They particularly lose the C's, the butyrate producing clostridiols.
Wait a minute, high blood sugar isn't just leaky gut, right? I mean, it's also...
You should read the work from Patrice Canny. He's from Belgium. Yeah, he did all the seminal landmark work.
But I mean, it's also eating the junk that people eat, the sugars and the breakfast cereals and the Hostess Twinkies and on and on and on.
It's so fascinating. There's a group called Ilanov. They're from Israel. They have a certain stool kit that's pretty interesting. What they found is that they check people's blood sugars eating the same food. Let's say like rye bread, for instance. Okay, some people, based on just blood sugars alone and their microbiome data, some people had, let's say, high blood sugars with eating rye bread, right? And we see this often. They have gluten allergies. You know, they have the whole bad signature, bad gut flora, right? And then he took he was looking at all kinds of people, and other people had lower blood sugars, better insulin sensitivity eating rye bread. Rye bread also is full of really good prebiotics. Grains actually can have really great oligosaccharides from the bran part, rye bran and the whole grain. And there's a lot of fiber, both soluble and insoluble fiber, right?
Okay.
Kind of like legumes too. They have a lot of these, you know, good fibers. And they would see a lower blood sugar. And it was all dependent on the microbiome signature.
But you're being sacrilegious right now. In the religion of functional medicine, thou shalt not say anything positive about grains.
All the longevity societies eat grains and beans all day long. I can't think we can dismiss their data. Did you ever watch the longevity film with Jason Pearl and Michael Roslin?
I never saw it. Is worth watching? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. If you've never interviewed Jason Pearl, you should interview him too.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, the diet of our ancestors is very important. I'm also at one point, well, I kind of gave it up now, but I was chapter leader for our area for Western A. Price. Are you a fan of Western A. Price?
You know, not necessarily, but you know, I know everybody else is, so.
I'm Chinese. When I took rice out of my life, my health went down.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't tell you how. I'm also ApoE2. We're agrarian adjusted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Even when I was sick and I had Hashimoto's and I was eating like 400 grams of carbs a day and a lot of sugar, my trigs didn't go over 100.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, which goes to show there's no one diet that's right for everybody. So as far as gut bacteria helping...
That's functional medicine for you, right, Dr. Weitz?
Exactly.
Customized. Yeah.
So as far as helping us detoxify mold mycotoxins, how do we accomplish that with probiotics?
So I love the Schumacher protocol and all these other, you know, mold ideas and stuff, but I go back to the microbiome, right? If we don't have the good microbiome, we also aren't going to survive mold. We have mold everywhere. Our ancestors grew up with mold all over with them. So it turns out a lot of the soil probiotics, many strains like L. rhamnosus, like in our probiotic, and B. longum, they have the ability to actually in vitro lower mycotoxin concentrations. It's pretty amazing. We also have different protocols using certain botanicals. They shut the genetic expression translation off for mycotoxins. So mold may be present in the ecosystem. Doesn't mean it has to be super bad all the time, every day. And it turns out our food, if we eat an ancestral diet, which is high in polyphenols, antioxidants, and prebiotics, even grains, okay, we feed these bacteria. Guess what B. longum and L. rhamnosus eat, right? They eat a lot of FODMAPs. They eat our mucus. They also... Studies show, I don't know if they eat polyphenols, but polyphenols increase their growth and proliferation.
Can we really eat an ancestral diet?
I have a hard time. You know, I don't eat as much fermented foods as my ancestors did, for sure. I don't eat as much plants either.
And I mean, none of our fruits and vegetables at all resemble the fruits and vegetables and tubers that ancient humans ate.
No, a lot of GMO now too.
Yeah,
exactly.
And the hybridized farming for hundreds of years, and
none of the fruit are as high in antioxidants either. They're all like farmed.
Exactly.
Yeah, our fish is farmed. It is difficult.
Yeah,
I would say it's not impossible, but it'd be a part-time job, right? And if I did eat all the vegetables and fruit, I'd be like gnawing like a horse and cow all day, right? And I don't have time for that either. So I do like something called bionic fiber to make up for it. It makes my stools like Bristol floor like twice a day. Like I don't even worry about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing I bring on travel sometimes, you know. I get bummed when
I was looking at some studies on a mycotoxin thing, and I saw that the spore-based probiotic, the soil-based probiotics have been shown to have some benefit as well.
Yeah, the bacilli all do. They also, just like Bifidobacterium longum, the strains that I mentioned, they also degrade glyphosate and have help with heavy metal remediation. Yeah, but Bifido and lacto might be our mainstay. They are in much higher concentration than the bacilli. With the bacilli, you don't need a little. You just need a little. A little bit goes a long way. With Bifido and lacto, literally, they can be in healthy controls, could be 0.5 to 1% out of the whole gut consortium. With bacilli, you'll see the strains, but they're much lower, much lower, like 0.1% or way lower. Like when you're looking at a 16S analysis, like from Ubiome or Thrive Kit. Yeah, the Vibrant Kit, they don't give percentages right now, but they're gonna give number quantities on the GI map from Diagnostic Solutions Lab. You can also see quantity. I kind of look at that as we look at our clients, but it's also great to get a culture. So we have media when we culture using CDSA, a comprehensive diagnostic stool analysis.
You find it beneficial to get a culture stool sample as well?
I'll take any data. All data gives limited information, but yeah, I like seeing it all. But then it ends up costing thousands of dollars for a
right. But if you had a patient who's willing to do whatever and cost wasn't a factor, you would get a genetic stool test and a culture-based stool test.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you see just a different picture. The media is still old school, but it still shows us our most like vile kind of bacteria that grow out. With the DSL, Diagnostic Solutions Lab GI map, it's awesome. They probably over visualize right now. I'm sure some of it's kind of noise. You can't see to that degree. But what we see is like with each of the phases we work on, we always go big to small. We work with people for 4 phases. We go big, parasites, helminths, eukaryotes. Then we go fungal, and then we go SIBO, bacterial, and then lastly we do viral, spirochete, phages, small things. We go in that order, and we always are looking at other eukaryotes through the whole thing. Fungal is really big, so we look at fungal throughout the whole thing. But with the GI map, it's really cool because the flora live in layers. The first layer is kind of the most weedy kind, more toxic, severely toxic, like the C. difficiles, right, and Campylobacter, the enterohemorrhagic E. coli. They can't really drill down E. coli well. You have to do genetic tests. So that's why the culture is not going to work so well. You have to use genetic testing to look at the different toxic species in there. They're all like, E. coli is such a menace right now. But what studies show is like L. rhamnosus, B. longum, all our ABCs, they all have natural anti-E. coli abilities. And then not all E. coli is bad either. There's a Canadian and other European strains of good E. coli. These are our first bacteria that were used to treat SIBO, actually. They gave 50% success rates. But we can't use that in the USA.
With bacteria, yeah.
Yeah. And depending on the study you look at, it can be 60, 80%, or even 100%, 97% improvement in SIBO. I see 100%.
A lot of practitioners are still dead set on not using probiotics when treating SIBO.
That's probably because they're using strep ones, right? And they have a form of Pandis. They have antibodies against strep already. You can't use strep probiotics. Many of the probiotics in the functional medicine field, they have very high amounts of strep. Strep is not a natural native of, the strep from Thermophilus is not a natural native of the human gut. And if people are reacting to it, it's like a food allergy. Would you give gluten to someone who's reacting with a high IgG, IgE with gluten? No, right? We take it out temporarily.
Some of the probiotics on the market have the wrong form of strep.
And they also may have Saccharomyces. Our Saccharomyces is our...
take Sacrum Isis?
No, I don't use any Saccharomyces.
How come?
So we look at the IgG panel from either Cyrex or Great Plains, and when there's a reaction, you definitely don't want to use it. But some of the IgG panels, they're not graded or calibrated to the person's own immunoglobulins. Some are underproducing a lot of immunoglobulins because they're immunocompromised. 80% of our immunity is in our small intestines. So if they're lacking all our ancestral core, like the ABCs, you can't trust the immunoglobulins. They're immunosuppressed. So their SIGA isn't going to light up. It'll be even 0. You can look at total immunoglobulins. You must grade that against everything. Vibrant now has a free add-on. You can just...
Cyrex does the same thing, and if their IgG is low, they'll recalibrate the numbers.
Yeah, so you actually will see if it's lit up. Yeah. So a lot of our clients, they light up for Saccharomyces. You definitely don't want to be giving Saccharomyces, but we take it away from everybody because again, we don't always trust the testing.
Well, what about for like C. diff? And we find it really helpful for C. diff and also for fungal infections.
B. longum's even better. Yeah. They did a study in babies because all babies now are born in hospitals, right? The higher in the gut B. longum was present, the lower the C. difficile colonization. All babies get C. diff. They're colonized, doesn't mean anything. But the second they get stress or antibiotics or formula, this increases their risk to express it, right? C. diff is literally, spores are all over hospital workers, nurses, doctors, everybody. It's on all the surfaces, doorknobs, everything. The more bleach they use, the more antiseptic they use, the more it becomes hardier. Spores last forever. Studies have found spores that are millions of years old embedded in like the amber of like different insect guts. Yeah. So C. diff is one that is like virtually indestructible.
So one more time, why don't we want to take Saccharomyces boulardii as a supplement?
Sacrum Isis, as you know, is a wild yeast. It's actually one of our number one healthy, good bacteria, good flora in the gut, good fungi in the gut. But when someone's permeable, or they have toxic flora, they have the signature of toxic flora, they could be selectively permeable. You know, wherever these bad flora are, they're causing little ulcers, so then they can enter the bloodstream, right? When Saccharomyces enter the bloodstream, what happens? The body launches an attack against it, right? Just like it would for gluten or dairy, or who knows what, like we see a lot of like joint problems, fibromyalgia. A lot of times it's Klebsiella citrobacter, right? It's growing in the gut, it's entering the bloodstream, the body's launching attack. Unfortunately, a lot of our tissues look like the cell walls of Klebsiella or citrobacter. And then, it can be muscles or mitochondria even, and then they get attacked. So people feel achy, don't feel well. As soon as people go on a certain diet and they also fix their gut, all these aches go away. Even if they're 60, 70, 80 years old, their aches go away. Aching is not really the best sign. It's not normal. It's not part of our aging process. It's a sign of decrepitness, right? Sarcopenia, like muscles go down as well, typically as well too. So there's a lot of different ways to assess leakiness or what's going on in the gut.
As a chiropractor, we got a lot of decrepit patients.
I know. So looking at the fungal markers on the Great Plains Lab is really the best, because you'll see the fungal there. It may or may not be, but the thing is, it's not direct. So you don't know if it's Saccharomyces. I look at the IgG to Saccharomyces. If it's even in the upper green or yellow zone on the IgG Great Plains panel, that means they could potentially be having IgG against Saccharomyces. It's not safe to give it if that's the case. Or is it safe to eat all the food, any of the foods that are slightly yellow until like 1 or 2 months later? Then they heal the gut and immune system calms down. They're kind of having this hyperimmune thing, right? They're attacking everything that falls into the bloodstream. But we can assuage the immune system. There's so many ways to calm the immune system down. Treating the adrenals. We use something called Nanomojo. Mojo is amazing. Using certain botanicals. They balance TH1 and 2. We use mistletoe now. We use actually cancer treatments for educating our clients to help them normalize their immune system. Everyone's at risk for cancer now. Even some of our best functional medicine leaders, they're like drug addicted, they're mental issues, depression, cancer. Why is that? They're missing something. They're missing the probiotics, I have to say. They don't have actually a great financial portfolio. I'd say it pretty much sucks, actually. If they've never evaluated, they don't know, right? Better to be ignorant, I guess. But it's good to know, because there's like steps that can be done, not to go overboard crazy, but not to ignore our ancestral past. We've always co-evolved with this legacy of our flora. Only the first time in human history now, kids are dying before their parents or even before healthy grandparents. It's insane. We must change this tide. It's not good for us to ignore it and ignore the earth terrain too. Yeah, because we're just reflections of the earth terrain. And how we treat the animals and the plants and the way we do farming.
Yeah, we're not doing a good job of that. Well, I think we have to bring this to a close. So any final thoughts you want to give our listeners, and tell us how we can get in touch with you and find out about your programs, et cetera, et cetera?
Absolutely. I'm at thegutinstitute.com. We also do Facebook Live every Tuesday at 2:00 Pacific time at our Facebook The Gut Institute page. You can contact us through our website, thegutinstitute.com. I also teach practitioners. We have a 50-hour gut certification immune certification program, and love sharing our protocols for what works in the cases. I have a very concierge practice, so we're usually, we don't have a lot of openings, so don't have a lot of openings. So I have a class, like a master gut class, if people are interested as well, just to learn. We have a lot of practitioners and coaches that go through it as well. They learn all the basics and get their gut a lot better. But thanks so much for having me on. I think everyone should be happy and have a look at their gut flora. Test it, don't guess it.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Dr. Weiss.